School, smartphones, politics, coffee, masks, baseball, trains, solitary confinement, and a talking cat that also transforms into a car. Persona 5 is a bizarre game that contains all of these things and more. However, this colossal game will suck you in for hours at end until you've reached the credits and realize that you've lived in this bizarre world for more than 100 hours. Persona 5 separates itself from other JRPGs in that it takes place in modern day rather than in a fantasy or sci-fi world, and it takes on some tough subjects such as sexual harassment, political corruption, and workplace abuse. The range of subjects it comments on manages to feel relevant to modern society and surprisingly doesn't come off as cheesy or forced, but handles it with care. You can tell that the developers behind Persona 5 were passionate, and it seeps through almost every facet of the game. You play as a teenage boy who is falsely accused of assaulting a man and is expelled from his school, put on probation, and is even disowned by his own parents until he's off. As a result, he is taken in by a coffee shop owner by the name of Sojiro Sakura and is confined to living in the upstairs attic of his shop, as well as being transferred to the Shujin Academy, which is where he will meet most of his companions. The protagonist is silent, and you choose how the protagonist reacts to situations through dialogue options, some of which are used to enhance relationships with characters, others of which have little to no impact on the story. By making the protagonist silent, it allows the player to project themselves onto him. The central theme of Persona 5 is justice. By giving the protagonist an unjust background, it creates a catalyst that adds motivation to bringing justice to Japan. To bring justice, the characters form a group called the Phantom Thieves, and steal the hearts of the unjust, forcing them to commit to all of their crimes and wrongdoings. They accomplish this by diving into an alternate reality that reveals a person's true feelings and desires, which is known as the Metaverse, which is a place where your footsteps are magical, and reveal traces of purple paint. Goop? I don't know. I don't get it either. Also, the characters' clothes change. Anyway, the Phantom Thieves also develop a website, appropriately named the Fan Site, where members of the site can request somebody's heart to be changed. The Phantom Thieves try to use this to find their targets and set lofty goals in targeting people that would make news headlines, increasing their notoriety, which in turn would allow people to speak up about the injustice they face in their daily lives, so they can steal their hearts and make Japan a more just place. However, as the Phantom Thieves continue to gain notoriety, it grabs the attention of the government and political strife ensues. What makes Persona 5's story stand out is that it doesn't just deliver a story about bringing justice to society, it dives a layer deeper and explores the meaning of justice while using relatable subjects to people living in modern society.
No.
Once the Phantom Thieves settle on a target, you will be given a deadline to steal their heart. During this time, you have the freedom to do as you please. You can choose to study, make coffee, work part-time, eat burgers, hang out with friends, and much more. Completing an activity passes time, and everything you do builds one of 5 social stat categories. Leveling up social stats is especially important when it comes to building relationships with other characters. The game will often prevent you from further developing a relationship by requiring you to be at a certain level with a specific social stat. Developing relationships with other characters is not only useful for story purposes, but it also plays a crucial role in the gameplay. By ranking up your relationship with other characters, you will gain access to a variety of different skills and abilities, which the game does a good job of making useful, and you will most certainly reap the rewards for developing them. If you're more interested in building relationships to get a better sense of the characters in the story, Look no further, as Persona 5 probably has some of the most developed characters I've seen in a game. The concept of having limited days may seem stressful and overwhelming. However, I would argue that it's not. The game is designed in a way that never punishes the player too harshly for mismanaging their time, and the incentives for managing it well are never too powerful where it will make it impossible to complete the game without them, but enough to make it feel worthwhile. It strikes the right balance, and in fact, I would argue that it actually makes the game more engaging. I often felt that it encouraged me to set my own short-term goals, which gave me something to strive for and continue playing. When someone's desires become too strong, they form what's known as a palace in the metaverse. These palaces act as the game's main dungeons. Palaces blend puzzle solving, stealth, turn-based combat, and sprinkles some story in between. These dungeons are long, but I was impressed at how well they kept me engaged. While you can split up your run-through of these dungeons into multiple days, it is optimal to complete them in one day so that you can spend your time building relationships and social stats on others. The puzzle solving is light, and the stealth mechanics certainly aren't going to stack up to a Metal Gear game, but these elements exist to create a change of pace and prevents them from getting stale. Where the game doesn't go light is in the combat. The combat in Persona 5 is turn-based and it is excellent. The system places an emphasis on being offensive, as it incentivizes the player to make quick work of the enemy, otherwise it will make quick work of you. You can make quick work of the enemy by utilizing their weaknesses. In doing so, you will be granted what's known as a one more, which is what it sounds like. It grants you an extra turn in combat. If you can manage to utilize every enemy's weakness, then the party will go into hold up, where your characters will surround the enemy at gunpoint. This stage gives you a few options. You can choose to force the enemy to give you money or items, negotiate with the enemy, or perform a team attack. Choosing to negotiate with the enemy will present the player with a series of questions that, if answered correctly, will result in obtaining the power of that persona. Performing a team attack will combine the strength of your party to dish out massive damage to all foes, which more often than not will end the fight. While I found the combat in Persona 5 to be strategically rewarding, that doesn't mean that there aren't a few minor flaws. As you level up your personas, they will gain new skills and abilities. However, each persona can only have up to 8 skills at a time. This isn't problematic early in the game, but as you continue to progress, it starts to feel restrictive. It's justifiable that the developers wanted to balance the game by preventing players from using low-level spells late in the game on high-level enemies to just tap into their weakness. But there are better methods of preventing that from happening without having to force the player to take away skills that they rightfully earned. For example, they could have implemented a system that makes low-level magic skills less accurate on high-level foes, thus incentivizing the player to use higher-level magic skills. You can, however, recover forgotten skills, but it's not something that can be immediately accessed. It's something you would have to do prior to entering a palace. And most notably, the game will end in game over if the main character dies, which there is no reason for at all, and it always happens right before the next save room, causing you to lose 45 minutes of progress. However, good news is that if you die during a boss fight, you do have the option to retry immediately, but not during normal encounters, unfortunately.
Huh? Hey! Someone! He's dead! He's killed himself! Damn it! Where did he hide a gun?
Persona 5 was built from the ground up as a PlayStation 3 game, and it shows. It certainly looks outdated, and it doesn't take advantage of what the PlayStation 4 is capable of. It's especially noticeable with shadows, as some of them appear to be glitchy and form sharp pointed edges. There are also examples of some scenery that's rendered in 2D rather than 3D, which makes the game feel a bit cheap. However, it makes up for it in unique ways. From the onomatopoeia in bustling cities, to shop menu transitions, to the flashy victory sequence, Persona 5 exhibits style at every corner, and very few games are as creative as Persona 5 in that regard. Cutscenes, on the other hand, are a bit underwhelming for the most part in terms of how they are presented. The game lacks any real camera work. Most of the time, the camera is static, and rather than zooming in on the character models, they resort to sliding in 2D portraits to represent different facial expressions. It feels cheap, but it's hard to complain considering the volume of dialogue that Persona 5 offers. There are so many cutscenes, it would be impossible to imagine the same amount of content and expect higher quality cutscenes. There are some anime cutscenes as well as full motion cutscenes, but the usual style far outnumbers these. The soundtrack is hard to describe. It ranges from vocal tracks where the lyrics are hard to understand except that one word, surprise, to rock tracks that could easily be mistaken by Dynasty Warriors music, to sexual music. It's good though, trust me.
Very well, bring it on!
Although I played the first Persona game, I consider myself a newcomer to the franchise, and while it's a bizarre game, I found myself enjoying my time playing it the further I advanced in the game. It's a game that stands out due to its modern relevancy and its tough subjects it tackles through the narrative. Package that with great turn-based combat, plenty of activities to do, and a great soundtrack, and you have a JRPG that's worthy of playing for the 100 hours it takes to finish the game.